We are hacking the Skyline dress today to have a bow in the center. So normally the way that the pattern works is the front is just one panel. There's no slit here. There's no bow in the front. There is a bow in the back on the straps, which you can see there's no bow on the back here. The pattern is, however, designed to be adjustable originally, and the adjustability is intact with this hack and almost is improved because the bow is in the front, and so it's really easy to just untie, retie, cinch these straps in higher, loosen them, lower the dress. It really is one of my favorite alterations to do for this pattern. And really, the hack is very straightforward. I love hacking patterns or hacking clothes in general. It's my very favorite thing about sewing, being able to look at a pattern or even like just an inspo pic on Pinterest and thinking, I really like that garment, that pattern, whatnot, but I wish I could do this about it. I wish this was different. I wish it was longer. I wish the straps were different, whatever. And most of the time, alterations like that, hacks like that are really simple. And I think a lot of times we just overthink it, or it's a confidence issue more than an actual skill issue. So I hereby give you permission to hack any of your patterns however you want to. Try your hand at recreating things you see on Pinterest. I believe in you. But this is a good project if you're wanting to kind of dip your toes into hacking, self-drafting, things like that. I feel like this is a really, really great one to start with. So basically all we're doing to this pattern, the only thing we're changing is the bodice. And there is in the pattern a front bodice and a back bodice, which are these two pieces. And normally the front bodice has a bias binding neckline, and then the back bodice neckline folds down to create a channel for the straps to run through in the back right here. So all we're doing with this dress is swapping how those necklines function. The front neckline now, instead of having a bias binding, has the channel that's folded down, and the back bodice, instead of having the channel, now has a binding. So to reflect those changes, we are going to have to make a few minor adjustments to the actual pattern pieces themselves. The two things we need to change on the pattern pieces are the seam allowance for the necklines, and then making this front bodice two separate pieces instead of one piece cut on the fold, like the original pattern has you cut on a fold. Instead, we're going to cut two separate pieces, but then we need to add a little bit of seam allowance to the center front to accommodate for that. So those are the only two changes we're going to make: seam allowance on the neckline, seam allowance in the center front. And because those changes are really quite simple, you could just lay your pattern pieces on your fabric as you're cutting and make the changes like in real time as you're cutting. But for the sake of clarity and just kind of showing you a better look at the process, I'm going to actually be tracing these pattern pieces and making edits on a new piece of paper to create a new pattern piece. So I will get to that in just a minute. But one other pattern piece we are going to be changing. This is the neckline binding normally for the front of the bodice, but we obviously need to change it since there's not going to be a binding on the front, but there is going to be a binding on the back. The back binding is a lot shorter than the front binding. You 100% could just eyeball it and guess. But what I decided to do was take the measurement from part of the instructions where it gives you recommendations of how to tie your straps and that back channel. There's a whole table of measurements for all the different sizes of how you might tie your straps. And so I took that measurement for a size 12, which is the size I'm drafting today. The back channel for a size 12 is recommended to be about 6.5 inches. So I just took this binding piece and folded it down to be 6.5 inches. The width would stay the same. So those are the three pattern pieces we're going to be working with: front bodice, back bodice, neckline binding. I'll show you how to draft those changes, and then I will walk through the construction. And I'm only going to touch on the construction of the bodice today, even though that is like 75% of the pattern anyway. The skirts stay exactly the same. So we will walk through the construction step by step, and then the skirts you'll do the same as the regular Skyline dress. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention. So this slit here is super adjustable. I kind of just eyeballed how low I wanted it to go. You could have it go all the way down to the bottom of the bodice. You could also sew it all the way up so it's basically only open right where the bow comes out. So that is super adjustable. Okay, I think we're good to go. Let's draft our pattern pieces. I'm going to start with the front bodice piece, which is pattern piece A. And again, all we need to do is add a bit of seam allowance to the center front for the slit and a bit of seam allowance to the neckline, because normally this is finished with bias binding, so there's really not any seam allowance there. And we are going to be folding it under to create the channel. So we're going to add seam allowance there to account for that. So the first step I'm gonna do is actually just trace it. And I'll also mention this paper that I'm using here is just a random roll of paper I got from Target in their like craft aisle. But I'll link a similar one, and you really don't need anything fancy. I get that question sometimes from people asking if they need to have like certain pattern drafting paper or thin paper or whatever. And it's just preference. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. Okay, now that that is all traced off, so the center front, it's just a matter of thinking through how you want to do it. I'm just gonna fold my center front in 1/4 inch 2 times to create this slit. And so I'm just adding 1/2 inch because, you know, 1/4 inch 2 times 1/2 inch, you get it. So I'm gonna add 1/2 inch of seam allowance to the center front. Very straightforward. And then for this curved edge here, I am going to be adding 5/8 of an inch. So if you read through the instructions of the Skyline dress, normally how you construct the back neckline is you fold it down 5/8 of an inch to get that back channel. Since we're just translating that to the front bodice, we're adding 5/8 of an inch here. And because this is a curve, it makes it slightly more complex, but not much. I'm just going to be measuring out 5/8 of an inch along the curved edge and then kind of connecting the dots afterward. I'll also need to extend this line out a little bit, and then I'll just connect that line. Perfect. Okay, that's it. And then like I said, instead of cutting this on the fold, which the front bodice is normally cut on the fold, we are going to be cutting 2 pieces of this mirrored. Mirrored just means one is going this way, one is going this way. Next up is the back bodice, and the process is extremely similar to what we just did, except it's even easier because we're only adjusting the seam allowance of the neckline, and that is it. So I'm just gonna trace this off again as it already is. All right, so basically all we're doing is conversely to the front bodice, we are now taking away seam allowance from the back neckline because we don't need to fold it. So we're just gonna take 5/8 of an inch away from the back neckline. Great, I'm gonna cut that out. All right, there we have our 2 bodices. And then I just remembered one other thing that you would want to adjust for this hack is making your straps the same length. So normally there's one long strap and one short strap because the bow is asymmetrical on the back. You can either choose to do both of them the length of the long one, both of them the length of the short one, or just make up your own length. I decided to do both the length of the long one because I like having like really long tails from the bow. Okay, I'm going to cut into my fabric and then we will meet back at the start of construction, which is generally going to be a bit more of a skim. So if, as you're watching this tutorial, you feel like you need a few more details or a closer look at anything, the super duper detailed video tutorial of like every single step for the Skyline dress as it normally is linked in the description as well. Okay, let's do it.
Right off the bat, I want to give you a closer look at my fabric and which side is the right side and the wrong side. It's a difference, but a subtle difference. So here you can see the right side and the wrong side. And we're picking up the construction here after I've already stay stitched all of the curved armpit areas and put my basting stitches along the back neckline. I'm also using pre-made bias tape for both the back neckline and the straps. I'll link that in the description, but the instructions go through how to make your own if you are not using pre-made. You can do it either way. I'm just cutting a little notch here in the center of the bias tape and also in the center of the back neckline. And then I'm going to flip my back bodice around so the wrong side is facing up because we want to have the right side of the neckline binding facing the wrong side of the bodice. So I'm pinning that in place, and I also decided to use a little tag this time as well. Once the center and end points are pinned in place, I'm going to pull on my basting stitches to gather my back neckline, and I'm just going to evenly gather that across the neckline binding until it's all evenly placed. Pin those gathers to secure them, and then repeat the process on the other side of the neckline so that the entire back neckline is gathered and pinned. And then we are going to secure the gathers down with a straight stitch at a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, which will fall right in between our two basting stitches, and will also fall right in the ditch of that fold of the bias tape. By the way, I know I'm going a little fast through some of these elements. That's just because a lot of these are similar to the construction for the main Skyline dress. So if you need me to go a little bit slower, I would head over to the main, like super slow, super detailed tutorial. Okay, you can see our stitch here that fell in between the basting stitches, which is causing one of our basting stitches to poke out. All you need to do is just unpick the end of it and pull it out. And depending on your fabric, pulling that basting stitch out can cause some little holes in your fabric, which is totally fine and normal. All you have to do is rub the holes out. This fabric didn't get super holy, which was great, but it's an easy fix. Now we're going to fold that bias tape over the raw edge along the lines that we have already pre-folded, and then pin or clip that in place. Then we will top stitch along the edge of this bias tape here, and keep in mind this is the front facing side of the fabric, and so this will be visible, so do your best to kind of go slow, stay steady, and keep it looking nice and even. I think it turned out pretty good. The inside's a little bit wonkier, but no one's going to see that, so it's fine. I'll also link these tags because I think they're really cute. Okay, now to create the slit in the front bodice, we are going to fold the center front in 1/4 inch twice, and I'm going to use my handy dandy hot ruler, which basically just measures for you or keeps your hems and folds equally measured. Especially for teeny tiny folds like this where the measurements really do make a difference, I have found it to be extremely helpful. So I folded that center front raw edge in 1/4 inch twice, and this is with the wrong side of the fabric facing up if you didn't catch that. So that's what that should look like. Repeat those folds on your mirrored front bodice piece. So now both pieces have been folded, and now you're going to unfold them, align the raw edges, and pin them together. And then however long your stitch is up the center front here is how high up your slit will be. So I'm just eyeballing it, but I did measure it and I sewed mine about 5 inches up. So I marked that place, I'm back stitching a little bit at the beginning of my stitch, and then I'm continuing it all the way down to the end of the bodice here. And this is with about 1/2 inch seam allowance. It's right in the ditch of where we pre-folded. You can get a better look here when the stitch is finished. You'll see that stitch is right in the ditch of the fold that we made, and then there's the other fold that will be tucking the raw edge under, hidden, and away. So now that we've sewn our slit up the center as high as we want it, we're now just going to top stitch down the rest of the seam allowance. So I'm just going right along the edge here of that seam allowance, going all the way down to the bottom, and then pivoting my fabric and continuing up the other side until it's completely top stitched down. And there you have a nicely finished front slit. And again, you can make this as high or as low as you want to. I did mine kind of in the middle. Now that we've done separate finishes on the front and back bodice, it's time to combine them. So we are going to lay the back bodice face down on the front bodice, so right sides are together, and pin the sides in place. Then we're going to stitch those sides together with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and we also need to finish the raw edges, which I've done with my serger. If you don't have a serger, that's totally fine. There's lots of ways you can do it on your regular machine. In fact, I have a video that I will link that shows you how to finish your raw edges. All right, now we just need to put our straps in place, which again, I'm using my pre-made bias tape for. So normally with the construction, we pin these straps starting flush with the back bodice and extend them all the way through the armhole, and they go out past the front neckline. But this time we are going to start at the front neckline and pin it going out and extending past the back neckline. Once again, we'll be stitching in the ditch of our bias tape fold that has already been pre-pressed, and we are just going to continue that all along the armhole, and that's at a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Repeat these same steps with your other strap on your other side, and it shouldn't matter which one you do where because they're both cut the same length. Now that that's stitched in place, we are going to fold our bias tape over the raw edge here and pin that in place, and make sure you're folding it enough so that it's covering up any of your stitches that you've done. Those should be hidden in the seam allowance. If you want to finish the end of your straps here, the tail end, an easy way to do that is just to fold your bias tape kind of backward on itself, and then we're going to do a little stitch here with like about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And my machine gives me trouble with things like this. I backstitch a lot, have to use my hand wheel, have to kind of lift my presser foot. Don't worry too much about it. It doesn't have to be pretty, it just has to be secure. And then you can tuck that little nub of seam allowance back inside the bias tape. I use my scissors or something that's dull but pointy to get a nice sharp corner there. And once that's been flattened, then we are going to stitch along the edge of our bias tape here, starting at the tail end and going all the way down through our armhole of our bodice. And I'll also note here, my machine does give me a little bit of trouble starting out ties like this. I have to give it a little extra nudge. You'll also notice that with each strap, the direction that you're going to be sewing in will be opposite. So on this one, I started at the tail end of my strap, and I'm going down through the bodice, and then on the other side, I will start at the bodice and go out, extended through to my tail end of my strap. Not gonna lie, I did a bit of a wonky job on that top stitching, but spoiler alert, the other side looked better, and no one is going to see up that close, so I don't really mind. So there's one strap done, and now we just need to complete that process on the other side. Once both straps have been attached, we now need to fold down our front neckline 5/8 of an inch to create the channel. Because this needs to be quite precise to make sure there's enough room for the strap to feed in through the channel, I'm going to use my hot ruler again to measure accurately that 5/8 of an inch mark. I found that using a hot ruler with curved edges like this, the easiest thing to do is kind of press and fold key spots. So I'm doing both ends of the channel, and then I'm kind of blending through to attach them, if that makes any sense. Just because the hot ruler is straight, so it's a bit hard to do on the curves. All right, now that those have been pressed in place, I am going to top stitch down along the folded over channel. And this fabric was really giving me trouble, so I had to really kind of adjust as I went here. So keep an eye on that your channel doesn't get too narrow as you are top stitching. I also backstitched quite a lot on the ends of this channel here because I don't want the straps to be pulling anything loose. All right, that looks wonderful. All we have left to do is feed the straps in through the channel and tie up our bodice. I use a safety pin attached to the tail end of my straps to feed it through the channel there. That just helps it go through the channel more easily. And then once both the straps are through, you really can tie it however you want to. You could just eyeball it and then try the dress on later and adjust it from there. Because I have made so many of these, I kind of know the length that I want my straps to be, so I'm measuring my straps and then putting pins in place to kind of keep everything where I want it to be while I tie the bow. I also typically do a double knot and then the bow when I am tying my bow on the back, but when I'm doing it in the front, I just do a single knot and a bow because I'm not as worried about it coming undone. Once you've tied your bow, your bodice is completely done, and the rest of the skirt instructions are completely the same as the Skyline, so we're not going to walk through them in this tutorial. If you need a video tutorial for the skirt, you can head to the main tutorial. Otherwise, the instructions walk through that as well.
This one is too good. I love it so much. So here's the full look, so you can see everything. It turned out amazing. But I really like how it looks with the bow in front. I think it's cute. And then as a side note that's kind of unrelated, this was actually my first time using pre-made bias tape. I always just make my own because that's what I'm used to, but I officially decided that I don't like it. Like, it has this sort of starchy feel to it that I feel like doesn't hang super well for like clothing. Like maybe if you're making quilts, it makes more sense, but I feel like the dress is like so flowy and has such a good drape to it, and I almost feel like it's hard to see like in video and pictures, but I don't know, it just feels like it doesn't belong. But it looks cute. So anyway, that's kind of a random note, but I don't think I'll be using pre-made bias tape anytime soon. Hope your dress went well. I really want to see them, so tag me if you make your own. And then if you want to try any other hacks for the Skyline dress, I've linked them in the description. And I also feel like you could use this hack to do like a shirt Skyline as well. So anyway, Hope it was helpful, hope it was informative, and I can't wait to see what you make next.